I broke into Yi Jicho's place to steal some cash, but ended up losing my mind in his trash heap of a mansion. As a clean freak thief with a six-pack, I couldn't help but spend the whole afternoon cleaning his house. I left a note scolding him for being a slob and pocketed 1,895 yuan as my labor fee. But the moment I sat down with my bowl of noodles at a shop, the police had me by the shoulder. Who would have thought Yi Jicho would sign a letter of understanding right on the spot? After that, he invited me out for meals and shopping every single day, always snatching the bill first, until that glass of red wine slid down my throat. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, I finally realized I had already become his prey. My name is Zhang Wei. I make a living by my lockpicking skills, but I've never used them for the right purpose. What choice did I have? Back home, there's my old mother who can't go a day without her medicine. The meager earnings I bring in every month can't even fill the black hole that is the hospital. When you're backed to the edge of a cliff, who has the energy to care about dignity or face? This time, my target was a high-end apartment complex in Chengxi. Unit 04 on the 17th floor. The owner's name is Yi Jicho. Skin like creamy jade, features like a painting. Even the name carried this unworldly, aloof air. I staked him out for a full 2 weeks. His daily routine was as precise as an alarm clock, 9 to 5, textbook office worker. With a mark like this, the risk was low. It was practically a fat sheep tailor-made for me. Today was the day to reel it in. I tailed him to the building's entrance, watching that graceful figure disappear into the underground garage. I counted a full 10 minutes in my head, making sure he wouldn't double back. Then I grit my teeth and took the risk. I strolled unhurriedly upstairs, slid my tools smoothly into the keyhole, flicked my wrist a couple times. A crisp click, and the door swung open. I slipped inside sideways, shutting the door behind me. The whole routine was as smooth as water. The next second, a sour stench of leftover delivery food, the musty smell of unwashed clothes, plus some weird lingering scent from a certain perfume. All of it smashed into my face like a wave. I froze in the doorway, half suspecting I'd knocked on the wrong door and stumbled into some garbage transfer station. I knew plenty of young people had messy homes these days, but to reach this level, Zhang Wei, who prides himself on being worldly wise after all these years in the game, had never seen anything like it. The sofa was piled high with clothes impossible to tell, which were still clean and which were already dirty. On the coffee table, takeout boxes stacked layer upon layer, with leftover food still inside, some boxes already sprouting mold. The floor was even worse, no place to step. Scattered cosmetic bottles and jars, torn apart delivery boxes. I even wondered if he never touched the ground in his own home, if he floated through the air on clouds. Was this the fairy's nest Yi Jicho was supposed to live in? A paradise? Had he been completely assimilated by the air in this room? My professional ethics were instantly drowned out by a physical, overwhelming discomfort. The cleanliness freak in my bones just couldn't tolerate filth of this degree. A silent rage flared up inside me. Such a great apartment, open layout, elegant decor. How could it be turned into a pigsty? Fine, you win. The theft can wait. If I didn't clean this place up to a decent state, I couldn't even find a corner to steal from. It'd be a disgrace to my profession. I tossed my tool bag by the door, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work. By the time I finished, it was already 4:30 in the afternoon. Me, Zhang Wei, a handsome six-pack having, sculpted by years of labor, was sweating like a pig in Yi Jicho's mansion, acting as a volunteer cleaner. I cleared the trash, wiped the tables, mopped the floors, sorted through those expensive-looking clothes, hanging what should be hung, setting aside what needed dry cleaning. The dishes soaking in the kitchen sink were practically cultivating mushrooms. The makeup bottles on the bathroom vanity were knocked every which way. I cursed under my breath the whole time. This job was more exhausting than picking 18 locks. When I finally tied up the last trash bag, outside the window dusk had fallen. Looking at the spotless living room, the floor gleaming like a mirror, everything organized neatly, the air now carrying only a faint lemon scent, I let out a long sigh. A bizarre sense of accomplishment washed over me. Exhausted. I was fucking exhausted. I barged into his bedroom to find something valuable. In the nightstand drawer, a scatter of cash and jewelry. I rummaged through. Not much cash, 1895 yuan total. That balanced things out a bit. Fine, consider this my labor fee, though the pay was wildly disproportionate to the work I put in. I grabbed a sticky note and wrote him a message in what I thought was a fairly stylish handwriting. Such a great home, and you've turned it into this. Even a thief like me can't stomach it. I started cleaning when you left for work, and it took me all day. I'm dead tired. The loose change in the drawer is my pay. If you really don't have the time in the future, remember to hire a housekeeper. He slapped the note, full of sarcasm and professional concern, onto the coffee table. I pocketed that 1,895 yuan as my hard-earned fee, grabbed my toolkit, and completely exhausted both body and mind, withdrew from this battlefield where I had fought all day. Yijiqiu dragged his nearly broken body and shuffled to his own door. Work at the company today was especially troublesome, leaving him feeling completely drained. His only thought at that moment was to kick off his high heels and bury himself in that pile of soft clothing and lie flat. He inserted the key into the lock, turned it gently, and a crisp click sounded. The door opened. That familiar blend of leftover takeout and perfume, intertwined. Complex scent, did not hit him in the face as expected. Instead, a wisp of fresh, cool lemon and spice aroma made the step he had taken suddenly freeze in midair. Is this my place? He jerked back, as if struck by an electric current. Startled, he pulled back his foot, looked up with a face full of suspicion to confirm the doorplate. 1704. No mistake, it really is a doghouse. No, wait, it's my sacred blessed spot. He cautiously poked half his body back in. His eyes flew wide open. The floor, which had been swallowed by all kinds of clutter, was now spotless and gleaming like new. It even clearly reflected his slightly dazed expression from sheer shock. The mountain of clothes piled on the sofa had vanished, revealing the originally textured fabric furniture. The coffee table. Oh my God, he had almost forgotten his own coffee table was made of transparent glass. He felt as if he had stepped into a strange territory. Tiptoeing smugly, he moved inward, afraid of defiling this cleanliness, this familiar pure land. He whispered in amazement, my God. Everything in sight was tidy, everything was orderly. Rushing into the bedroom, the bed that had been a complete mess was now neatly made. Even the creases at the corners seemed meticulously designed. His fingertips trembling slightly, he pulled open the wardrobe door. Inside, clothes were hung strictly by color and season, each one perfectly in place. Even his little cartoon print underwear and sexy lace styles were neatly folded in their dedicated storage compartments, exuding a fresh scent blending sunlight and laundry detergent. He gasped and covered his cheeks. A scorching heat surged from the soles of his feet straight to the top of his head. Rushing to the kitchen was even more unbelievable. The stovetop light gleamed bright. The range hood's shiny body reflected his face, slightly bewildered by shock. The mountain of dishes piled in the sink had vanished. The drying rack was clean and tidy. Had the river snail maiden appeared, or was the river snail guy from every company case study come to life? Wait, he only has 2 keys in total. One is with me, the other is with... Just as his brain CPU was overloaded, his eyes landed on the overly clean coffee table in the living room. A note paper stood out conspicuously. He walked over and picked up the note. The handwriting on it was rather elegant. Such a nice home and you've turned it into this. Even a thief like me can't stand it. I started cleaning as soon as you left for work. Took all day to finish, really exhausting. The over 1,000 yuan in the drawer is my payment. If you really don't have time in the future, remember to hire a housekeeper. Thief Yijiqiu suddenly snapped back to reality. He dashed into the bedroom and yanked open the bedside table drawer. Sure enough, the loose change inside was gone. A chill shot from the soles of his feet straight to the top of his head. A burglar had been in the house. But what was wrong with this burglar? He didn't touch the jewelry or electronics, only took less than 2,000 in cash, then gave the place a thorough, all-around deep clean, and even left a thoughtful note to educate him. Was there something wrong with this plot? He suddenly remembered. The hidden micro-camera in the living room cabinet. He frantically pulled out his phone to retrieve the footage, fast-forwarding again and again. In the footage, a tall, upright man, not long after he left, expertly picked the lock. Yijiqiu's heart tightened. Here he comes. The man entered the house. And then, exactly like his own reaction just now, he was clearly stunned. The surveillance even precisely captured the fleeting bewilderment on his face, and a certain indescribable sense of collapse. Then a ridiculous scene played out on the screen. He didn't immediately start ransacking the place for valuables. Instead, he stood still, hands on his hips, frowning at this pigsty. Then, as if having made some kind of resolution, he set his small bag down by the door. And then, the surveillance faithfully recorded a live broadcast of what could only be called a miracle in the housekeeping industry. Taking out trash, wiping counters, mopping floors, sorting clothes, moves clean and efficient, meticulous and thorough, especially when he saw in the surveillance that the man, brows tightly furrowed, still carefully scrubbed by hand those lace underwear he had casually thrown everywhere. Meticulous and thorough, especially when he saw in the surveillance that the man, brows tightly furrowed, still carefully scrubbed by hand those lace underwear he had casually thrown everywhere. The little witch on the screen before him, Yijiqiu's cheek, stung red all the way to the base of his ear. This was too embarrassing, but somehow, staring at the screen, at that strange man drenched in sweat, now showing a look of utter disgust at a stubborn stain, now slightly nodding in approval at conquering some hidden corner of grime. He couldn't help but crack a smile. Yet deep down, a faint, indescribable ripple stirred. The man's focused demeanor as he tidied up, his profile with sharp, defined lines, every move tracing the outline of taut muscles, especially when he occasionally bent down, revealing faint abs. Stop, you, what are you thinking? He's a thief. The final frame of the surveillance footage froze on that man. Turning away, cash in hand, Ijicho curled up on the sofa clutching his phone, his mind stuck on repeat, uncontrollably replaying over and over. A man both handsome and fit, with some inexplicable house-cleaning obsession, crashing into his world in such an absurd, bizarre way. The more he thought about it, the hotter his cheeks grew. The more he recalled, the more his heart pounded urgently. After a long while, he took a deep breath, struggling to calm his restless heart and burning face. Then, he quietly made up his mind. His pale, slender fingers trembling slightly, he picked up his phone, swiped the screen open, and his voice carried a hint of barely concealed embarrassment and hidden excitement. Hello? Is this 110? I want to report a crime. My house was visited by a very strange thief. After leaving Yijicho's place, night had already spread across the streets. I wandered into the food street, with that over 1,000 yuan stuffed in my pocket, but it felt heavy, dragging me down. Not the weight of the cash, but a knot in my chest. This job was pure loss disguised as profit. If word got out, the guys in the trade would laugh their teeth off. Exhausted in body and mind, my stomach was clinging to my spine. Spotting that familiar old Chen's chicken noodle shop at the corner, my legs moved faster than my brain, and I just walked right in. Boss, a big bowl of beef noodles, with extra meat and an egg. I slapped the money on the greasy table, my voice tired from cleaning all day. Old Chun replied with familiarity, coming right up. Xiao Wei, you look beat today. I grunted vaguely in response, found a corner seat, and collapsed into it. The shop was filled with the rich aroma of bone broth and the smoky air of the streets, which made me feel like I'd finally dragged myself from Yijicho's battlefield back to reality. The noodles came quickly. I picked up my chopsticks, stirred them, blew on the steam, and was about to take a bite when several figures in police uniforms suddenly burst in. Freeze! Police! Before I could react, both my arms were twisted behind my back. A sharp click, and cold handcuffs locked tight around my wrists. The noodle dangling from my lips plopped back into the bowl, splattering a few drops of oil. The customers in the shop stared in shock, all eyes fixed on me. My mind went blank in a daze. Getting caught in this line of work was only a matter of time. If you walk by the river long enough, your shoes are bound to get wet. But why so fast? The cameras. That had to be it. The cameras. There must have been hidden ones in Yijicho's place. Damn it. I was so busy cleaning, I forgot my most basic professional instinct. What's your name? A young officer asked, face stern. Zhang Wei. My head hung low, face burning. Not because I was caught, but because the way I got busted was just too humiliating. Did you break into Unit 1704 in Lijianjuan residential area this afternoon? The officer pressed on. Yes, I admitted it. The cameras probably caught everything clearly. Caught red-handed, denial was useless. Take him away. 2 cops escorted me out of the noodle shop and shoved me into the patrol car. Through the window, I saw the stunned passers-by outside, and old Chen's shocked, regretful face. I'm done. Totally finished this time. Burglary, even if the amount wasn't huge, it was enough to put me in deep trouble. Mom was still in the hospital needing money. I'm such a failure. Sitting in the interrogation room under the blinding lights, I confessed everything from start to finish, including how I picked the lock, how I was stunned by the scene before me, and how I inexplicably started a thorough cleaning. How I took that 1,895 yuan as a service fee and left a note cursing and scolding him. The police officer taking my statement listened. The expression on his face, it was absolutely priceless. He clearly wanted to laugh but forced himself to hold it in. Zhang Wei, would you consider this a spur-of-the-moment decision during the burglary? Suggest, no, helping others. I replied with a tearful face. Officer, I admit defeat. I just had itchy hands and couldn't stand such filth. I haven't touched that money at all. It's still in my pocket. I'll return it in full. I accept whatever punishment you deem fit. After the procedures were completed, I was temporarily detained in the holding cell. Lying on the hard cot, staring blankly at the ceiling, my mind was in turmoil. All kinds of feelings churned inside me. The next morning, I was still pondering life. The supervising officer walked over. Zhang Wei, come out for a moment. I figured it was time for interrogation. I hung my head and followed him out, but I never expected In the reception room, besides the uniformed officers, there was also a woman standing there. The air in the room was thick with an indescribable subtle tension. I buried my head in my chest, only catching a glimpse of that warm figure from the corner of my eye. Yi Jiqiu was wearing a light blue dress today, her long black hair softly falling over her shoulders. Now she stood beside a police officer, her brows and eyes concealing an otherworldly beauty, yet faintly revealing an inexplicable hint of excitement. Zhang Wei, right? A slightly older officer spoke first. After our verification work and communication with Ms. Yi Jiqiu, there are several matters we need to clarify with you. My heart clenched suddenly, and I held my breath, waiting for the final verdict. First, according to local regulations, the threshold for criminal filing in theft cases is generally set at 2,000 yuan. The officer paused, his gaze first sweeping over me, then turning to Yi Jiqiu. As for the cash you took that day, Ms. Yi has confirmed. The total amount is 1,895 yuan. This figure indeed does not meet the filing standard. Then the officer's tone softened noticeably. As for Ms. Yi Jiqiu, after fully understanding the situation, she voluntarily submitted a written letter of understanding to us, indicating she will not pursue any action against you. At that, I jerked my head up and looked at Yi Jiqiu in disbelief. She happened to sneak a glance at me too. Our eyes suddenly met in midair. Like a startled deer, she quickly averted her gaze. Strangest of all, a suspicious blush rose on her fair cheeks. I had picked Yi Jiqiu's door lock and taken over 1,000 yuan in cash from her. Not only did she not pursue it, but she handed over a letter of understanding. Finally, the officer cleared his throat, as if struggling to maintain a serious expression. Your actions have indeed constituted illegal entry into another's residence and a subjective intent to steal. However, during the actual implementation, the circumstances were quite special. Considering everything, you are a first-time offender, your attitude in admitting fault is sincere, and since the amount involved did not reach the filing threshold. Moreover, with the victim's full understanding, after our review, we have reached a final decision. We will not file a criminal case or investigate this incident of yours. No filing. I'm off the hook. This huge surprise crashed down on me, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. But then the officer's tone took a sharp turn. The law is no joke. Illegal entry into another's residence is already a clear-cut illegal act. Considering the special nature of your actions this time and the potential disruption to social order, we have ultimately decided to impose a penalty of 11 days of administrative detention, along with necessary legal education. We hope you will reflect deeply and, in the future, stand tall and live an upright life. 15 days in detention compared to the possible prison time, this was like going from a heavy sentence directly to a light one. So light I could float away. I accept. I will definitely reflect deeply. Thank the government. Thank you, officer. I nodded frantically. The heavy stone pressing on my chest finally settled firmly back in place. After the paperwork was done, I followed the supervisor toward the door, ready to report to the detention center. As I passed by Yi Jiqiu, I couldn't help but stop. My heart was a mix of emotions as I glanced at her. Miss Yi, thank you. I forced out this clumsy sentence. I truly didn't know what expression to show toward this victim. Breaking in to steal, only to end up with no case filed and an extra 15-day all-inclusive legal education package. My experience was surely one of a kind. Yi Jiqiu lifted her face. The blush on her cheeks had not yet completely faded. He lowered his voice rapidly and said, Actually, I should be the one thanking you for cleaning my house so thoroughly. It's never been this tidy. His voice dropped lower and lower, as faint as a mosquito. The guard beside him coughed dryly at the right moment. I quickly lifted my foot to follow, but my heart felt like a spice cabinet had been knocked over, sweet, sour, bitter, spicy, and salty all mixed together. How on earth does this woman's brain work? 15 days in detention passed in the blink of an eye. Every day besides studying laws and regulations, I spent the rest of my time reflecting on life. I've thoroughly figured it out. I absolutely cannot touch these shady paths again. I got lucky this time, but what the next round will look like, no one can say. Even for my mother lying sick in bed, I have to find a legitimate way to make a living. As I stepped out of the detention center gate, the sunlight outside was dazzling. I took a deep breath of free air, ready to start a new chapter in my life. But who would have thought, just as I reached the street corner, a white BMW silently glided up beside me. The window rolled down slowly, revealing Yi Jiqiu's delicate face with exquisite makeup and a hint of rosiness. Zhang Wei, you're out. I froze in place, and the alarm bells in my heart instantly blared. What is this girl up to? Miss Yi, do you have something? Isn't the case already closed? Why is she coming to find me? Yi Jiqiu bit her lower lip, as if mustering great determination. To celebrate your regained freedom, I'll treat you to a meal. Think of it as a thank you for your hard work cleaning my place last time. My eyes flew wide open, almost suspecting my ears were playing tricks. The victim was arranging to treat the perpetrator to a meal, with the reason being gratitude for helping her clean the house that was illegally broken into. Miss Yi, this probably isn't appropriate. What's done is done. Let the past be the past. I've already said it, so just tell me whether you'll do me this favor or not. Her tone carried a hint of spoiled stubbornness, but her eyes were filled with anticipation, and even a trace of a certainty that was hard to refuse. I looked at her like that and felt as if my soul had been stolen. As if possessed, I nodded. Fine. I awkwardly opened the passenger door. I sat down inside the car, which was filled with the same fresh lemon scent that later became familiar in her home, mingled with the pleasant fragrance of her perfume. The seats were soft, and the surroundings were comfortable, yet they made me restless. Someone just released from prison like me, sitting in such a luxurious car with a beautiful woman. It was an absurd mismatch. Yijichio seemed a bit tense too, both hands firmly gripping the steering wheel, focusing on driving, only occasionally darting a quick glance at me from the corner of her eye. Finally, the car stopped in front of a private kitchen restaurant with an elegant and upscale facade, exuding a quiet and refined atmosphere. The private dining room was exquisite and tasteful, a world apart from the smoky, lively little eateries I was used to. As I flipped through the menu, her gaze barely lingered on the prices. She smoothly rattled off a few dish names and asked, "Any dietary restrictions?" I answered briefly, "No, anything's fine." At this moment, how could I have the spare mind to study the dishes? My head was churning with this bizarre situation. As the dishes were served one after another and the room was left with just the two of us, the subtle tension in the air grew thicker. The table was laden with exquisite delicacies, all perfect in color and aroma, yet they tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Miss Yi, why are you helping me? And treating me to this meal? I'm actually a... The word stuck in my throat and ultimately couldn't be said, but she knew perfectly well. A faint blush crept across Yijichio's cheeks. She picked up her chopsticks and fiddled absently with the rice in her bowl. Her voice was low. At first, I was really mad, and honestly scared. But later, when I watched the surveillance footage, I found you so strange. You didn't seem like a bad person. She paused briefly, lifted her face, and looked at me with bright, sparkling eyes. Have you ever seen a thief who would spend an entire day doing a deep clean of the homeowner's place? And then leave a note to lecture them? Do you know, when you were mopping, the way you grimaced at stubborn stains, and the expression you had, a mix of disgust and seriousness, when you sorted and folded my underwear, the way he bared his teeth at stubborn stains, and the look on his face when he sorted and folded my underwear, a mix of disgust and seriousness, the way he bared his teeth at stubborn stains, and the look on his face when he sorted and folded my underwear, a mix of disgust and seriousness. How amusing. My face felt like it had been set on fire, a blush spreading from my neck all the way up to my forehead. She had indeed scoured every corner of the surveillance footage, down to the smallest detail. God, how utterly humiliating. My OCD was flaring up, and I was about to add a few more excuses, but Yijichio suddenly broke into a smile. I know, that's why I find you special. She added a piece of food to my bowl. Her tone grew a bit more casual. Come to think of it, I should thank you. The day I came home and pushed open the door, seeing that level of cleanliness made me feel like the whole stretch of time ahead had brightened up, and I had someone look into it. I know your mother is in the hospital and you're short on cash. So, my heart clenched tight as I stared at her. She investigated me. I don't overthink it. I don't have any other intentions. I just want to give you a hand. Your mother's medical expenses. I've already deposited a sum in advance. You don't have to worry about that for now. What? She covered the medical fees? This hit me like a sudden bomb, blasting my mind completely blank. No way. I couldn't take that before. We're not even related. Besides, I blurted it out almost without thinking, but she cut me off. She leaned forward slightly, drawing closer to me. Her warm breath, laced with perfume, almost brushed against my cheek. A faint hint of ambiguity crept into her voice. I told you it's a loan. It's not a gift. If you feel bad about it, you can pay me back slowly. How? I instinctively wanted to say that I couldn't even find a decent job. But when I looked up, I met her eyes, so close to mine. Those eyes shimmered with moisture, clearly reflecting my pathetic state at that moment. So foolish. You could pay off the debt by cleaning my place for me, right? I've watched your technique over and over. I'm really impressed. I'll count each trip as 1,000. How about that? 1,000 per trip? That price is far above the market rate. Besides, the phrase "clean my place for me" When it came from her lips, combined with the current distance and the look in her eyes, changed everything. It no longer sounded like any ordinary manual labor. My heart started pounding uncontrollably, and I couldn't help swallowing hard. The air seemed charged with countless tiny currents, the temperature in the private room feeling several degrees higher. What exactly do you mean by this? She leaned back in her chair, picked up her wine glass and swirled it gently. Just what I said literally, but her gaze still clung to me firmly. After that subtly charged New Year's Eve dinner, a bizarre thread seemed to have been drawn between Yijicho and me. Every 3 or 4 days, her message would arrive right on time. The content was always the same, her tone perfectly justified. The house is a mess again, come clean it up quickly. The message would always be followed by a transfer, exactly $1,000. Each time, I'd tell myself deep down that this was just repaying a debt, a legitimate job. But every time I turned the key to open the door of 1704, faced with a room that, while not as disastrous as the first time, was still a chaotic mess, there was always an indescribable awkwardness in my chest. What exactly was my status here? A dedicated housekeeper? Or some strange, twisted plaything for her to project onto? While I cleaned, Yijicho sometimes stayed home, sometimes not. Whenever she was home, she would snuggle into the sofa, a laptop on her knees handling work, or binge-watching shows. Every so often, her gaze would lift from the screen and follow my movements. It wasn't the look of a supervisor inspecting work, it was more like appreciation or savoring. It made my skin crawl. Even my mopping motions stiffened a few degrees. Once, I was grappling with a stubborn, years-old grease stain on the kitchen counter. She shuffled over in a pair of cotton slippers. Hey, can you only clean? I'm hungry. I'm sick of takeout. I didn't even look up. I snapped back irritably. If you're tired of takeout, learn to cook yourself. I can't. Her voice laced with a hint of coaxing. You're so efficient with cleaning, you can probably cook too, right? Show me your skills. Whether I was provoked by her tone or wanted to prove something deep down, I inexplicably dropped the rag, washed my hands, and pulled open her fridge. The ingredients inside were quite well stocked. Likely purchased recently. What do you want to eat? I tied on an apron. Instead of a stiff reply, she said, whatever, I'll eat whatever you make. That day, I used whatever was in the fridge to whip up a simple meal. 3 dishes and a soup, braised spare ribs, steamed sea bass with enoki mushrooms, garlic broccoli, and a bowl of tomato egg drop soup. All ordinary home-style dishes, but I nailed the heat and seasoning just right. When the food was set on the table, Yijicho took her first bite of the ribs, and her eyes curved into 2 crescent moons. Zhang Wei ate voraciously, devouring the food like a storm. Completely ignoring any sense of decorum, he shoveled food into his mouth while mumbling praise. Better than any 5-star hotel chef. Your cooking is incredible. Watching him eat with such relish, the reluctance in my heart quietly faded, and I even felt a faint tinge of subtle satisfaction. After that meal, Yijicho asked me to clean more and more frequently, and the focus clearly shifted from sweeping and tidying to cooking and taking charge of the kitchen. Until one day, I had just finished tidying up the area he had assigned, and was about to head to the kitchen, when he called me back to the living room. Zhang Wei, let's talk something over. His voice carried a hint of laughter. You see, you're great at cleaning, and your cooking just hits the spot for me. I happen to need a reliable person to manage the daily routine here. Why don't you stop doing odd jobs and come work as my full-time live-in housekeeper? How about that? Full-time live-in? Yeah. Monthly salary of 10,000, meals and lodging included. I'll cover all your mother's medical expenses until she recovers. How does that sound? There's no reason for you to refuse this offer, right? Over 10,000 a month, full coverage for your mother's medical bills. This wasn't just a generous offer. It was a pie falling from the sky, landing squarely on my greatest need. I couldn't find a reason to refuse, nor did I want to. Okay, so I simply packed my bags and officially moved into the guest room of Yijicho's house. My status shifted from temporary cleaner to live-in housekeeper. The work was exactly as he described, cleaning and cooking, with occasional errands. He paid generously, even advancing the first month's salary, so I could send money home. But the moment I moved into Yijicho's place, the initial joy of that windfall was quickly replaced by a growing torment. The source of this torment was Yijicho himself. It was as if he had fully unleashed his true nature, or rather, dropped all pretenses in front of me. His home attire grew bolder and more casual. Silk slip dresses became his go-to look. The fabric was as thin as cicada wings, clinging tightly to his well-proportioned curves. I never had the chance to observe closely before, but living under the same roof now, I realized just how unfairly good his figure was. He was like a wild rose in full bloom, vibrant and showy, exuding an irresistible allure. And I, the nominal housekeeper, day after day faced this extreme visual onslaught, struggling to maintain what little reason I had left. I kept telling myself, Zhang Wei, you're here to work. He's your employer who pays your salary. Your mother's medical bills are in his hands. Don't you dare have any improper thoughts. So I did my best to play the part of a blind and oblivious housekeeper. When he walked past me in scant clothing, I immediately looked down and focused on wiping the table. When he bent over to pick something up, revealing an enticing curve, I promptly turned around to study the size of the stove flame, and Yi Zhiqiu seemed determined to test the limits of my self-control, repeatedly dancing on the edge of my boundaries with endless delight. Time passed quietly, marked by my awkwardness as a live-in housekeeper and his leisurely ease, days and nights flowing by. One weekend afternoon, he came out of the bedroom dressed. Zhang Wei, come on. Keep me company. I'm going out. Where to? To watch a movie. Colleague gave me tickets. Waste not, want not. We arrived at the cinema, picked up the tickets, entered, found our seats and settled down. When the lights dimmed, and the eerie, spine-chilling soundtrack of the opening credits began, I realized belatedly, this was a horror movie. A horror movie. Instinctively, I turned my head to glance at Yi Zhiqiu beside me. The faint glow of the screen flickered across his face. The pace of the film was fast, with jump scares coming one after another. Every time a ghostly figure flashed on screen or a sudden sound effect blared, Yi Zhiqiu would flinch sharply and gasp through clenched teeth. Within the first 20 minutes, he had unconsciously scooted from his seat to mine, his arm pressed tightly against mine, a slight tremor passing through him. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said stubbornly, but his voice clearly trembled. Just a bit cold. The air conditioning was indeed set low, but I sensed he was more scared than cold. Then another gruesome image flashed by, accompanied by a character's piercing scream. Yi Zhiqiu let out a soft cry, and with a sudden lurch, he leaned into me, burying his head in my chest. The warmth and fragrance of his body collided with me without warning. His pleasant scent, mingled with the sweet smell of cinema popcorn, rushed into my nostrils all at once. My body froze, my arms suspended in midair, unsure where to place them. My mind went blank, leaving only the vivid sensation of this trembling figure in my arms. Scared? If you're scared, don't watch. No, I can't stay. She buried her face in my chest. She replied gloomily, but showed no intention of getting up from my arms. So for the second half of the movie, she spent almost the entire time in my arms. I became a giant human pillow, not daring to move an inch. My arms eventually hung loosely behind her back, cautious, afraid to touch any inappropriate parts. I didn't catch a single glance of the plot on the screen. All my senses were completely taken over by the woman in my arms. Her hair brushed against my chin, tickling. Her breath, through the fabric, seared my skin. Her softness pressed against me. This was truly the sweetest torture in the world. When the lights suddenly came on after the show, she sprang away from my arms as if burned. Her cheeks were red beyond belief. Let's go. She stood up first, almost fleeing. I took a deep breath, suppressed the restlessness in my chest, and followed. On the way home, the car was filled with a subtle silence. She focused on the steering wheel, while I turned to look at the rapidly receding night outside the window. But the soft touch from earlier, and the drumming heartbeat lingered and wandered for a long time. I thought this matter would just be over. At dawn, I was half asleep when a soft knock came at the bedroom door. Zhang Wei, are you asleep? Yi Zhiqiu's voice came from outside, tinged with a hint of timidity. I struggled to get up from bed and open the door. I saw her wearing that almost transparent silk slip nightgown, with a thin jacket casually draped over it. Holding a pillow in her arms, she stood barefoot at the door, her eyes slightly red, like a frightened rabbit. I'm a bit scared. The images from that movie keep swirling in my head. I can't sleep. Can I sleep on the floor in your room? Looking at her pitiful appearance, and then glancing at her outfit that was practically nothing, I felt my temples thumping wildly. Let her sleep on the floor in my room? What kind of talk is that? A man and a woman alone kindling in fire. But she is my benefactor, the one who pays my salary, who covered my mother's medical bills. Now that she's this scared, it's just a small request. I took a deep breath. You sleep on the bed. I'll sleep on the floor. How can that be? There's nothing wrong with it. Muttering to myself, I had already started moving spare bedding out of the cabinet. You're the homeowner. There's no reason for the homeowner to sleep on the floor. She watched silently as I quickly set up the floor bed, taking about 10 minutes. Well, thank you, she finally replied in a low, hushed voice. She tiptoed onto my bed. I turned off the overhead light, leaving only a dim yellow bedside lamp. Then I quickly rolled into the floor bed, facing away from the bed, and squeezed my eyes shut tight. "Good night, Zhang Wei." Her voice drifted from the bed, with a barely perceptible nasal note in her tone. "Good night." The room fell silent again, leaving only 2 faint breaths, even ebbing and flowing. I could even catch the subtle sounds of her tossing and turning on the bed. The faint rustle of fabric was amplified several times in the quiet of the night. I don't know how long passed before I, in the interweaving of deep exhaustion and nervous tension, finally fell into a deep sleep. In the dream, I seemed to return to my childhood, holding the old orange cat we had kept for years in my arms. It was furry and warm all over, carrying the scent of sun-drenched air. Found a cozy spot in my arms. Purred contentedly. Subconsciously, I tightened my arms, pulling that warmth closer into my embrace. My cheek rubbed against its soft forehead. An unprecedented sense of stability and satisfaction wrapped tightly around me. This dream was truly wonderful. After that night of sharing a room, the boundary between Yi Zhiqiu and me became increasingly blurred and subtle. It was as if she had found some new amusement. The frequency of her asking me to go out on weekends suddenly soared. She called it experiencing life and not always staying cooped up indoors. But beneath every outing, there flowed a surging, indescribable undercurrent of ambiguity. When visiting art exhibitions, it would wear a tight bodycon skirt. While I bent over to read the exhibition descriptions, it would bend over just right. At newly opened luxury boutiques, when it tried on those jaw-droppingly priced dresses, it would always lift a corner of the skirt and ask, "Zhang Wei, does this look good?" This long string of frequent dates, along with the wordless daily interactions, also made my understanding of her no longer limited to the surface. When she was in a good mood, she would intermittently talk about herself. I gradually pieced together her background. She was a typical wealthy heiress. Her father had run this fairly large company in his early years. Her family was well off, but fate was relentless. Her father contracted an incurable disease a few years ago. Before his death, for reasons unknown, he transferred most of the company's shares, leaving enough for her and her mother. A once inexhaustible fortune, his mother devastated by bankruptcy, now long away from home, traveling far and wide to clear his mind, rarely returning home, only taking care of himself. He had long grown tired of those glamorous parties and socializing with socialites, finding them utterly dull. So he casually found a leisurely administrative job, just to pass the time. "Why didn't you hire a cleaner or a proper housekeeper before?" I finally blurted out the question that had been weighing on my mind. Given his family background, finding a professional domestic worker would have been as easy as taking something out of a bag. Why let the house fall into such a mess? And why end up seeking me, a thief with no formal training? Hearing this question, Yi Zhiqiu's hand, which was arranging the bouquet of lilies I had just bought into a vase, paused slightly. He turned his face toward me, a smile curling on his lips. "Hired help from outside. How could they be as attentive as you?" That smile carried a hint of self-mockery, mixed with something indescribable. His tone was light and airy, his gaze drifting over my face. In a slow, lingering arc, yet in the end he never gave a true answer. The days quietly slipped by. In my daily routine as a live-in housekeeper and my increasingly warm interactions with Yi Zhiqiu, until my birthday arrived. I almost forgot about it myself, but in the morning I received a birthday greeting message from my old mother. A faint bitterness was welling up in my heart when Yi Zhiqiu mysteriously sidled up to me. "Zhang Wei, the weather is so nice today. Don't stay cooped up at home. Come out for a walk with me." Before I could utter a single word, he dragged me out the door. And that walk stretched from the first light of dawn until dusk enveloped the sky. He seemed to have prepared a flawless itinerary in advance, packed with activities from start to finish, yet every detail showed thoughtfulness. We went to the tech exhibition I had been longing to visit but couldn't bear to pay for. Then we had an exquisitely refined lunch at the revolving restaurant on the top floor. In the afternoon he even dragged me into the arcade I was obsessed with as a child. His shooting was adorably clumsy, and his rhythm at the target practice was all over the place. But his laughter was freer and more unrestrained than anyone else's, like a high school girl sneaking out on a sugar high. My hands were full of bags and parcels, 9 out of 10 of which were his shopping spoils. My legs were so sore they felt like they no longer belonged to me. "What do you want for dinner?" My treat. "Pick any restaurant." Looking at the city lights flickering on before me, an inexplicable feeling of attachment and a certain longing surged up in my heart. "How about, we eat at home tonight? I'll cook for you." Yi Zhiqiu was stunned for a moment. Then his eyes curved into crescent moons. "Good, let's eat at home. Let's go buy groceries at the supermarket." We turned into the nearby supermarket, and he pushed the shopping cart. Like a child curious about everything, He tossed any ingredient that caught his interest into the cart. Can you make this? What about that? I want to eat that dish you make. Finally, we lugged several bulging bags of groceries back to room 1704. In the kitchen, I tied on an apron and threw myself into the hustle and bustle of the stove. Today, for the first time, he didn't curl up on the sofa. Instead, he pulled up a high stool and sat by the kitchen island, cupping his chin in his hands, quietly watching me. Washing vegetables, chopping, stir-frying, seasoning, my mind was entirely focused on the stove. All he could hear was the rhythmic sound of the knife on the cutting board, the sizzling from the oil pan, and my occasional instructions. Hand me that plate, okay? Grab me a scallion. Coming. He was like a diligent little bee, helping me out. The warm yellow light enveloped us, and the room was filled with an unprecedented sense of comfort and peace. When the last soup was ready, the table was fully set with several dishes that looked and smelled delicious. Yijicho produced a bottle of red wine that looked expensive from who knows where, skillfully uncorked it, and poured the wine into a decanter. He smiled as he poured me a glass, then filled his own to the brim. Hard work, chef. Looking at the feast on the table, and then at the charming, smiling face across from me, a corner of my heart felt as if it had been soaked in warm water, melting into a soft, tender mess. This taste of home, I hadn't experienced it in a long time. But just as I picked up my chopsticks, ready to enjoy this extraordinary birthday dinner, Yijicho gently reached out and pressed down on my wrist. His eyes sparkled with mischief and anticipation. There's still one most important part, the birthday gift. I froze, my heart already pounding. None of that counts, he interrupted me. He straightened up and pulled me over to the sofa in the living room, pressing me down to sit. You sit here. Close your eyes, no peeking, his tone carried a touch of undeniable pride. I obeyed and closed my eyes, feeling both curious and amused inside, wondering what new trick this lady was about to pull. I heard her light footsteps, heading toward the bedroom, followed by the soft sound of the door closing. Second by second, time crawled by. In the living room, I could even hear my own heartbeat. What on earth was she up to? Just as I was about to lose my patience and open my eyes to peek, a faint jingling of ornaments drifted over. But this light, subtle scent was different from the perfume she usually wore, an elegant fragrance entirely its own. You can open your eyes now. Her voice rang out, laced with a barely perceptible nervousness and shyness. I slowly lifted my eyelids, and in that instant, my breath caught, my heart skipped a full beat. In the soft lamplight of the living room, Yijicho stood there silently. She had changed into a magnificent hanfu, a sky-blue ruchuan with a high waist, made of the finest silk, embroidered with delicate lotus vine patterns. The wide sleeves hung like clouds, and the skirt cascaded to the floor like flowing water. Her long black hair was swept up into an elegant bun, with a few strands falling loose at her temples, making her skin look even more like snow, her brows and eyes as if painted. Usually, she was either charming or playful, but now she resembled a lady stepping out of an ancient painting, ethereal and pure, with an otherworldly aura untouched by mortal affairs. Seeing my dazed look, she pressed her lips into a light smile, a faint blush blooming on her cheeks. Zhang Wei, happy birthday. I'll dance for you, as a birthday gift. With that, she didn't give me any time to react. She lowered her head slightly, her slender fingers forming an elegant gesture. The rhythm of ancient music slowly unfolded, and her figure gracefully began to move. The flowing sleeves swept out like clouds, like smoke, like mist. Her skirt swirled like ripples in a dreamlike scene. Her dance steps weren't particularly skilled or polished. Some turns even showed a hint of clumsiness. But that wholehearted concentration, that unreserved devotion, along with the tender emotions flickering in her eyes, struck me more powerfully than any flawless technique. As she spun, her hair and sleeves fluttered, like a blue lotus, blooming to its fullest under the moonlight. When she looked back, her eyes seemed to speak, shy yet wanting to convey something, filled with starlight and my own dazed, lost reflection. Fine dishes and wine were laid out beside us, and a beauty in hanfu danced for me alone. At that moment, thief, servant, employer, all the barriers of identity blurred into nothing. I sank into the sofa, watching this dreamlike scene before me, and a surge of surreal yet intensely vivid illusion rose in my chest. Who was I, Zhang Wei, to deserve this? It felt like I possessed the fortune of an emperor, and this breathtakingly beautiful imperial consort had her eyes fixed on me alone, from beginning to end. The dance ended as she slightly bowed, arms aligned with her sleeves, and looked up. The living room fell silent again, leaving only our slightly rushed breaths and the unspoken, yet pervasive undercurrent of intimacy. She stood there, cheeks flushed, chest gently heaving, with a mix of boldness and timidity as she looked at me, asking softly, "Zhang Wei, do you like it?" Staring at this woman who seemed like a celestial being, her eyes shimmering as she gazed at me, my heart pounded thunderously in my chest. "I like it." My voice came out hoarse. "I like it very much." Yi Zhiqiu's eyes instantly lit up, as if 1,000 stars had fallen into her gaze. The blush on her cheeks deepened. She gracefully moved to sit opposite me. "Let's eat then. Try chef, he's cooking." "Okay. Let's eat." I raised my glass and gently clinked it with hers. The crisp sound of the toast seemed like an unspoken signal, drawing back the curtain on a night destined to be extraordinary. The dishes were delicious. I had put my heart and soul into them, each one a signature recipe I'd saved for special moments. We chatted as we ate, sharing stories about the exhibitions and arcade games we'd enjoyed during the day. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful. She kept refilling my glass, her beautiful eyes shimmering in the lamplight and wine's glow, seductive and captivating. The red wine tasted of fruit and oak on my lips and tongue. I've always had a good tolerance for alcohol. Usually I can down a pound or two of baijiu without a problem. But somehow, tonight, just a few glasses of red wine. A strange, overwhelming drunkenness surged violently from my abdomen, and my mind began to grow heavy and dizzy. My vision was also covered in a thin mist, and across from me, Yi Zhiqiu's beaming face seemed veiled in a soft focus filter, growing even more unrealistically beautiful, as if a fire had been lit inside my body, burning me until my mouth was dry and my heart was utterly chaotic. I shook my head, trying to clear my mind, but only felt the dizziness grow heavier. "What's wrong, Zhang Wei? Did you drink too much?" Yi Zhiqiu's voice was laced with concern as she leaned closer. Warm breath brushed against my ear. I looked up at her, meeting her eyes that stared straight into mine. But in those eyes, what I saw instead was a victorious, deepening, sly smile, like a cat that had stolen a fish. "Something's wrong. This is a problem." The thought flashed like lightning through my chaotic mind. But it was already too late. A wave of intense weakness swept through my limbs and bones. I tried to brace myself to stand, but my body only swayed uselessly. My arms were so weak I couldn't even muster the strength to lift them. I forced out the single word, and then my vision began to spin. Just before my consciousness plunged into darkness, I saw through my blurred sight that Yi Zhiqiu had stood up. A flush mixed with shyness and triumphant determination rose on her face. Her jade-like hand gently reached toward her waist and untied the sash of her exquisite hanfu. The delicate skin of her shoulder glowed softly under the light. She leaned in close, her fragrant fingers brushing across my burning forehead. A soft murmur lingered in my ear. "Zhang Wei." The last thing I saw was that victorious, shy yet bold smile at the corner of her lips. Then I sank completely into darkness. When I woke again, it was the glaring sunlight outside the window that startled me awake. My head throbbed as if it would split. I frowned and lifted my eyelids. My blurred vision slowly focused. An unfamiliar crystal chandelier ceiling. Beneath me were extremely soft bedclothes. This wasn't the guest room I had slept in. A sudden realization struck me. I turned my head sharply. Yi Zhiqiu was lying right beside me, sleeping soundly. Her long black hair spread across the pillow like seaweed, her long lashes resting quietly like butterfly wings. The brocade quilt had somehow slipped to her waist, revealing her bare, flawless shoulders and delicate collarbones. My mind exploded with a bang. My entire body went rigid. Even my breathing stopped. Fragments of last night's memory crashed into my mind. Her graceful dancing, the unusual drunkenness, the loosening of her sash, and in the darkness, the blurry but scorching, me. Just then, the person beside me let out a soft moan. Slowly waking up, meeting my shocked and bewildered gaze, she was startled at first. Then her cheeks quickly flushed crimson. She instinctively pulled the quilt up a little, covering her chin, leaving only a pair of moist eyes blinking at me. In those eyes was shyness. "Ever since you cleaned for me that day, I decided I want you to take responsibility. For a lifetime."